Hello and welcome back to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Hemma Lomax and Lisa Fine, produced by Corporate Compliance Insights and hosted by the Compliance Podcast Network. Today we're diving into a theme that's close to my heart. Now is the time for all of us to become entrepreneurs in residence. Whether you sit in legal, compliance or governance, your job isn't just to manage risk, it's to design the future of our field and to experiment with what's next. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce our special guest today, Kathy Zhu. Kathy embodies that bold entrepreneurial spirit. From starting her career in big law to building out commercial and legal ops at DoorDash to co-founding Streamline AI, she has lived the journey of turning frustration into innovation. No doubt leveraging some of her personal life hacks, which we'll hear about. Kathy is proof that you don't need to wait for permission to build. You can start experimenting where you are, and in the process, become a legal tech influencer, shaping the next generation of compliance. Kathy, welcome to Great Women in Compliance. I'm so happy you could join me today.
Thank you so much, Hemma. It's wonderful to be here.
You're amazing, and I can't wait to give our listeners a taste of you. But can you maybe start, before we dive in, sharing a few words about yourself so they can get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I always like to start kind of in the beginning because it does kind of speak to the kind of person I am. So I lived in a bunch of different continents growing up, actually four different continents. I moved to the US when I was 15, so I very much have an immigrant's perspective, if you will. And after graduating from law school, I went to Michigan Law School. I started practicing at Wilson Sonsini on the West Coast in their Palo Alto office, which I did for a few years, representing early stage clients predominantly. And then after that, I went in-house and I had a couple of stints at some really wonderful B2B SaaS companies, first at Medallia for 4 years. And then DoorDash hired me in 2018 to be the first commercial lawyer and to build a practice from the ground up, which I did over the course of 4 years. And that's really where the journey, the entrepreneurial journey begins. So we'll unpack that in a little bit. But now I'm the co-founder and CEO of Streamline AI, which is an AI-powered intake and matter management platform, purpose-built for legal departments and compliance departments to address their pain points.
Well, I love that. Look, you said you started by representing startups, so I can see there's a seed of entrepreneurialism in there to start with. But what pushed you into wanting to design something new as an entrepreneur, whether in residence or as co-founder of Streamline? What's your why there?
Yeah, the simplest answer to that is just pain was coming out of my ears. So when I started at DoorDash in 2018, the company had raised hundreds of millions of funding and it was taking off into hyperspace. It was growing so fast. And I was the only one in the entire business of thousands of people handling every single commercial agreement, no matter if it's sales facing, from the largest to the smallest deals, the mom and pop, like pickle sandwich shop, Mr. Pickles down the road, to all the way to the national brands, all the partnership agreements, marketing. So you can imagine just the sheer volume I was walking into. I knew I could never hire fast enough. So I immediately started thinking about how do I create efficiency, not as a wanting to, but purely out of survival and necessity. And that's when I started to think about the biggest challenge I was facing was actually not in the weeds of negotiations or redlining, but actually just getting my arms around everything coming in the front door. There wasn't a solution that actually did what I needed it to do. So ultimately, I hacked something together, and then I saw just very clearly a solution that I would be able to actually help design, partner with my co-founder, who I then met, to build. But I want to say something else here too, Hemma, which is you mentioned that I was working with startups and I had this entrepreneurial bent. It was the biggest surprise for me, more than anyone probably, that I would one day end up being a founder because unlike many other people, I didn't go into law school with a JD MBA. I was actually, to be very honest with you, very scared of business and like I didn't know anything about finance. When I started my contracts class, I had no idea what a contract was, what a business transaction was, what a stock was. So I'm not coming at this from the standpoint of, oh, I wanted to build a business since I was 8. It
Uh-huh.
was something I fell into. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons we connected so quickly, I think. I love that you tell that story. You did mention that to me. And I love this idea of you surprised yourself. And that's kind of the theme I want to bring out of today's podcast, today's episode, because we can surprise ourselves when we open ourselves up to this. So I hear you. It's not that you were always longing to be a business person or have a long line of your family doing this. I remember when I went to law school too, avoiding commercial law and thinking I would never work for a corporation. So it's interesting, isn't it? How things evolve. And I'm going to assume underlying that there's an openness somewhere along the line. You had an openness to evolve. Now, to be fair, you mentioned pain, pain as a driver, and I want to unpack that because that's an interesting one. First, let me say that story you tell of being the only one or being very lean and having no resources. It's what do they say? Do more with less, do more with less. It's just like a given these days, isn't it? It's not, it might surprise some that some place like DoorDash is lean in the background, but it's quite common from my experience that we're running on empty and on fumes sometimes to do some magnificent things. That's very typical of compliance officers too. So these unicorn people are needed to do these unicorn jobs. But lots of us, we sit in that pain and we shrug. You explained quite effortlessly how you went from pain to solution, but let's talk about the pain for a second. Was it that easy, or did you sit in the pain for a while and was there frustration?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And certainly in the role that I had before when I was at Medallia, we were dealing with that pain every single day as well. But when you move from a software company selling software and think about the volume of sales agreements you see to now being in a marketplace company, that volume has just gone up, not just by 5x or 8x, has gone by probably 20x, maybe even more than that. And so the pain just became intolerable very fast. And so that gave me some activation energy. But I do agree. I think in our field, in the compliance field, as well as the legal field, we're almost trained from very early days, especially for all the lawyers. And I know not everybody is, but you go through law school and that's a painful experience. You take the bar exam and that's a painful experience, right? Or for everyone working compliance, you're under-resourced, you don't have enough, but that you look around and everybody's sort of dealing in the same thing. And you start wondering, oh, maybe this is the status quo that I just need to put up with. And that's actually the biggest shift I think that we all need to start making, which is that's not true. Because as soon as you start accepting it, your desire to actually make a change goes down, but dissatisfaction actually increases. And ultimately, I think that's why burnout and people leaving the profession is one of the biggest things I'm seeing as a systemic industry-wide problem. I've actually done entire webinars just purely on the problem of burnout.
Mm.
And that's an end result. But if you trace it all the way back to the beginning, if we started doing something about the dissatisfaction and the pain, which is mostly caused by manual work, by us not doing the work that we actually signed up for, and then day in and day out, where that's interrupting you and stopping you from doing the work you know you should be doing, ultimately, if that doesn't get addressed, then you look down the road and that's where burnout can happen. So we need to challenge ourselves early and not put up with the status quo. And
Right.
that's my viewpoint, Hemma, on it.
Not just a brief, you talk about a shift, it's really a mindset shift, and I'm really inspired by it. I love that you mentioned burnout because we spend a lot of time, especially women in this profession, the legal profession, the compliance profession, thinking about how we can help ourselves with the burnout, but maybe thinking that the root causes are outside our control. So
Yeah.
I love what you said because and we're going to talk about things like meditation and how you may have helped yourself with the burnout
Right.
that arises. And I want to get to your life hacks there. But before we even do that, just this idea that the pain is information that you then use as a driver and accelerator to find a solution and trust that and believe that. And maybe this is your super secret sauce that you have some control over that. You have some power. If now I know you, I would say you're the best person, right, to actually come up with the solution because you're in it, you're in the pain, you have all the information that you might need to assess the root cause and the problem. So I know I spent a bit of time on this, but I love this idea of mindset. I juxtapose that with the shrug, this idea that what can I do? It's about resources. There's never enough time and never enough people. Somebody once said to me, the trick is to be resourceful, not get more resources. Sounds like
Yeah.
another do more with less thing. But it resonates with me because you were clearly very resourceful. You didn't suddenly come up with money for new ideas. You came up with new ideas to do more or less. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And actually, the first thing I did was put together free solutions to
Yes.
actually address my intake problem. I wanted to experiment and see, wow, what happens if I just put up a Google form and then would auto-populate a Google spreadsheet and I would see all the requests that came in. And that obviously led me to, oh, I don't have reporting. I don't have the details on the exchanges of information after it comes in, but at least it got us started. And again, totally free. And so this idea of the shrug, I think that's so good because so often we think somebody else is better positioned to solve this, not me. Especially with companies that have legal operations, maybe as well as the legal ops team that should be solving this, not me. But you are the ones actually, to your point, Hemma, dealing with the pain. So you actually probably know how to solve that pain and at least like what it is that you're looking for to address the pain. And if you can take that first few steps, you will help ultimately, if you hand it off to somebody else, you'll help whoever it is that you bring in to see them with the right path going forward. But it is this sense of responsibility that we take on ourselves. We're the best positioned, not somebody else,
Yes,
to try
yes.
to solve it.
Now, that attitude and that mindset clearly sets you apart and I'm sure is key to your success. But I also know that meditation is an important life hack for you. Can you talk a little bit about how that's helped you keep this mindset, this positive, can-do attitude?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to my 20s, that was actually the most stressful period of my life. I always like to think that necessity is the mother of all invention. What a great saying. It's so true. So I sort of hit this end of the road situation where I was just like, clearly nothing I'm doing, just spinning around in my own mind is solving this. What can I do outside of myself? What tools can I actually try? And that's really where I discovered meditation. And that took me on this journey that I've been on ever since. It's a journey that never ends, which is really the amazing thing. And I recognized early, wow, there's so much that we are in control of just simply by controlling how we think. So that's really the first step, right? Because if you can control and change the way you think and you move from being a negative, kind of pessimistic outlook or always looking at risks and what could go wrong, and instead you start shifting that mindset to what could go right? What happens if things are actually going the way I want it to? And then you focus instead on this positive future and outcome. You would be amazed at all the opportunities and the people that show up, and all sorts of things will come your way to actually help you get there. But when you're in a negative frame of mind, these same things could come, but you won't even see them. You won't even pay
Mhm.
attention to them because you're so focused on something else, you see? So that's really what meditation enabled me to do is it made the negative talk track more and more quiet, and it allowed me to identify when I was going down a negative track and instead switch gears, right? Switch lanes so that I'm on a different track. And most people in this life, I think they don't even realize that it is as simple as that because they'll just allow themselves to keep going down and it gets into the spiral, right? And then life looks like, oh my gosh, there's nothing we can do. So it's as simple as identifying. That's really mindfulness in a nutshell. But the meditation is the tool that you use to make the mindfulness more effective.
Smiling so big because you're speaking my love languages here. This is my listeners will probably know that I always want to talk about the survivor brain and the sage brain. And I want to just what you've been saying. I believe in that so much. And I love that you find meditation as a way to apply that wisdom. Because again, we have a lot of great stories on this podcast about what we should be doing, what would be a good idea, but you're really getting us to the how, right? What might be getting in our way for not doing it and how we might be able to not just get out of our own way, but I think, in my experience, accelerate this. If being an entrepreneur in residence seems scary to you, this, what you've just talked about, will make it will supercharge it. It will make it less scary and then some, right? And so your success is not just luck. It's that mindset shift. That's what I believe. Yeah, so glad that I asked you that question and you shared that because that's really important. Could just stop there, mic drop. But they say like one of the features of the sage brain, as opposed to the survivor brain, the limbic system, is entrepreneurship. It is empathy. It is creativity and innovation. So it doesn't surprise me at all now that you've said it. That's one of your life hacks and your business hacks, your professional hacks.
Yeah.
Really nice. Gosh, where do I go after life hack for innovation? Let's talk a little bit about that then. So you've practiced for years. You've got the wisdom of having the right mindset, and you use meditation as a tool. What gives you the courage and the oomph to go out and build Streamline yourself and leave the security of a job and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, that's such a good question. I've been asked this so many times by lots of, what I discovered now being in this seat and having the good fortune of talking to so many talented and amazing leaders out there, compliance legal leaders. So many people have this hidden desire actually to wanting to do something. So many people have said, Kathy, I dream about starting my business one day, but how do I leave this behind? I've invested so many years of my life. It's a very intentional choice, right, to go down the path that we've chosen. And a lot of us derive a lot of satisfaction from it. And I always like to say, if I had found something that did what I needed it to do, if I found this intake and matter management solution, I would not have left. But it was really a few different realizations, Hemma. One is, if not me, then who?
Ah,
So I don't think an engineer or even the most brilliant AI specialist or product manager can really do this. We need a lawyer, or at the very least, someone who's living this experience every single day to actually design the product. And we've had so many people actually say, it's like you're in my brain when they see a demo. I'm not even in that conversation, right? They'll just say, it's you're in my brain because there's no substitution for actual lived experience. So there's that. There's, if not me, then who? I think I'm the best person to do it, even if I don't have all of the different skills. And I would only discover later how many other things I would have to learn. But it's that first realization. And then the second is when I looked in the industry, what I really recognized is that as an industry, we need to make a change. I've already talked about how burnout is one of the unfortunate consequences, but really at the heart of it, legal teams are not getting the same respect, and compliance teams, I'll say the same, not getting the same respect as other, especially revenue organizations, right? We're constantly being labeled as a cost center. We get short shrift when it comes to resourcing. People pass us by when they give awards and accolades. We're often an afterthought, and it is incredibly disempowering for people who are really who I see as the superheroes of the organization. If we did not exist, existential issues could happen, right? And that business may not exist, but we are having the hardest times when it comes to advocating for ourselves, showcasing our own value, talking about the work that we're doing. And so that's what I recognized is the problem I'm solving starts with intake, starts with organization and centralizing all the work we're doing. But the really like the higher level issue we're solving here is giving legal the means or compliance departments the means to actually talking about their value in the love language of the business, which is in metrics and numbers, right? Your CFO is not going to care if you show up with a bunch of stories about the fires that you're fighting or the existential problems. They don't care. But when you show up with actual hard, concrete numbers and data around your output, around your deliverables, about how you're accelerating the business in dollars and cents, that's when they will completely change the way they're looking at you. So really, Hemma, what I saw here was an opportunity really for me not to just build and ship a piece of software. This is actually one of the linchpins to changing the way that the industry is currently being viewed and how we elevate ourselves ultimately.
so beautifully put. I've got goosebumps because I know that my listeners will what you've said will resonate with us. We're a cost center. We always considered a cost center, and we all, as enlightened as we are, we're all struggling with that. And I love that what popped into my mind as you were talking was entrepreneurship as a service. Because we talked about your personal pain during the working environment where you needed to solve a problem for yourself, but actually you also saw there were problems, the same pain was being felt by others, and you, if not you who, to your point, could help solve that for many. And I don't just mean the technical problems of workflows, the existential problems that, as you've articulated it, there's self-worth and self-value and knowing our place in this in the ecosystem. So I love that you saw a big problem or a big pain and you decided as a service to do something about it. See, I remember hearing, I went to a Tony Robbins event and one of his people was talking about sales. And somebody said, "Oh, I'm just not a good salesperson. I don't like to sell." And they told a really good story about how selfish it was for you not to sell your talents because other people needed them. And I thought it was nice framing. It's like, oh, you're right. Here I am in my own head about, oh, I don't like to sell. But if I've got something really valuable for the community, why would I withhold that? So
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's what you've done. You've clearly seen you've got something va valuable and you could have taken the easy route. I say that and laugh because actually it's not easy to stay somewhere when you know you've got this spirit in you.
that's right.
Unless, let me challenge myself here, you can be an entrepreneur in residence. So you and I bonded over this sentiment. Tell me a bit more about what we mean about when we say entrepreneur in residence.
I was the one that got goosebumps when we first met and this topic came up because there's just so much truth in it. We hear these stories of these great founders who are out there building, and that may not be something, actually, honestly, that's a calling for every single person. However, the spirit of entrepreneurship, the spirit of building something, pioneering something new, carving out this new path, blazing a trail. You can do all of that still in the comfort of your current organization, right? Because there's so much. And by the way, the leaders that I admire the most, and I'm meeting these individuals, they're still unfortunately rare. I hope there are going to be more and more of them as time goes on at all levels. It's not just the leaders. It's actually sometimes who the folks on the front lines who say things like, Kathy, I want my department to actually be seen within the organization as leading in innovation. I want to adopt technology and new tools and processes, and for other departments to look at what we're doing and try to do the same, try to come on board. Wow, what an incredible ethos to have. So that really kind of embodies the entrepreneurial spirit, right? And these are folks that really are just doing the work every single day, but they want to do it in a way that is different, that is more efficient, that is more forward leaning. And that's possible for every single person here listening to the podcast.
It really is. Again, I always like to quote a Disney movie because I used to work at Disney. Ratatouille says everyone can cook. And I love this because that's the point. Everyone could be an entrepreneur. And again, with this mindset that you referenced, why not everyone? Why not anyone? I'm in a relatively new role at DocuSign, and I told my own team, I would like you to think of yourself as entrepreneurs that maybe will build a business out of what you're doing in your day job one day. Now that seems a bit controversial, telling my team to go build business. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying maybe that too. I want to give them whatever they want, right? That's the point. But for now, I know if they come with that spirit, if they come with that energy, their work is going to be very different to a team that might be waiting to be told what to do based on old paradigms, right? So I told them, be prepared to reinvent your job every day. And again, back to your point about the pain is information, the pain is opportunity. This is what I'm hearing from you. And
Yes.
so I've started with this mindset, I've started to see any pain as bright side, glass half full. What is that telling us about what we might be able to do or a gap that needs to be filled? Is that fair? Is pain the information that identifies or flags the opportunities to us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, if you look at, how investors evaluate new businesses to invest in, one of the first things they don't look at, oh, what is the cool piece of AI, whatever it is that you're building. It's more, what pain are you solving? Because they know that even if you have the best technology in the world, if you're not addressing a real problem, there is no market for your company. So that's just on a very kind of practical, pragmatic level. And I think the other thing is we should set a challenge for ourselves where you can actually say, hey, I don't want the team to have to do the same thing twice if that thing is not driving actual value and substance or helping us feel fulfilled. I used to always like telling my team when I was leading the commercial team at DoorDash, don't do work that won't get you promoted. It's my job as the leader of the team to figure out what else we could do with that work to either eliminate it, make it go away, or outsource it so that we don't have to do it, because we need to maximize the time we have in our day to really spending that on the substantive things that'll move the business forward. So that's really the challenge here, right? And it comes up in so many ways. It's not just technology, it's actually creating, right, processes that you can leverage over and over again. Like when I onboard someone new, I'm creating these onboarding programs and decks so that it becomes repeatable. So I don't have to keep repeating the same information again and again. Or creating knowledge bases for the team, for the business teams too. If you can have, that's a place where AI is coming into our product. You can have an FAQ or knowledge base. The business teams can use natural language to query, and then it can just pull information out in real time and serve it up to them through Slack or whatever tool you use. So those are some hacks that are immediately now eliminating time that your team is spending, right?
That's right. And you said time, but just going back to the point you made about the repetition, why would we have somebody doing the same thing over and over again when we can automate it, we can find a better way? And so that, again, back to that, your job will not look the same next month, let alone next year. That's part of the excitement, I think, part of the energy of this. So looking for opportunities. It's scary though, right? So that you and I are giddy about this, but others might think this is kind of scary and hold on, kind of like my job. Why would I want to change every month? So what advice would you give to someone that maybe wants to try experimentation but fears a bit of failure or feels failure in maybe a conservative environment? We're all a bit risk averse as lawyers and compliance officers. So
Oh, definitely.
what's your advice to someone that is interested in what we're saying but is maybe lacking a bit of courage right now to try.
So I love this one value that DoorDash has still, which is think big and start small, right? So what is the next incremental step you can make towards that, where it may not be tomorrow that you're rolling out a brand new tool or process to the business teams, but maybe the first step is, hey, let me get educated as to what's happening right now. What are some demos what are some technologies? But first, of course, it's taking stock of, like we were saying, what are the biggest pockets of opportunity? Where are you feeling the most pain? And then you do a visualization of, if that pain were to go away, how would my life look? So my piece, again, I'm all about the hacks. My hack here in getting out of that mindset of fear and what could go wrong is, if you focus on that future you really want. Oh my gosh, if I had 20% of my time back, oh my gosh. So there you go. That's the energy that you need, right? To then activate you so you can start taking the next incremental step. So that's one. The other thing that's really important and super helpful is, how do you not make this just about a project for you, and how do you bring other people along in your journey? So I'll tell you a story here. When I was at DoorDash, I brought in a tool that ended up being used by the entire sales team. We actually built an entire new function from this new process that I created, but the inception of it was actually a compliance driven need.
Ah, look at
It
that.
was. It was. So I realized that the contracts that we were all signing, they were all getting stored in different places, in Salesforce and Docs and all these different places. And I wanted to have one single way of preserving records of all these boilerplate agreements. So for me, again, that was the need that I identified. I went out and found a tool. But you know what? I realized several things. One is, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much work to roll this out. I can't do this on my own. So who did I activate? I actually activated our sales training leader. So totally different part of the organization, not legal operations, sales operations. Okay. I brought him along so much, and he's just a fantastic human being. He ended up quarterbacking and actually running this project and resourcing it out of the sales resourcing and budget. But it solved my pain, right? And then what I did was, I went on a road show first with the legal leaders. I did demos, and you can ask the company to help you with that. They were sending me videos, right? So I brought the legal team along, and then I would catch people in the cafeteria and bring the key salespeople along. I would be like, hey, can I just get 5 minutes of your time? So I didn't realize this, but I was already building my muscle later on for evangelizing my own product. But that's a breadcrumb trail of literally how I got started, right? First, I brought one person along who was essential to this project being successful. Then I actually started influencing the departments that I needed to influence. And all of a sudden, this is not just me. Now everybody's so excited, right? They were putting plans together and timelines, and that's how an idea can grow into something huge. And I will tell you, Hemma, that probably did more for my legal reputation or reputation within the business than any agreement I could have signed and
Course.
negotiated,
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
So you're not just an entrepreneur, but a true influencer here. And why, again, what I hear when you talk, yes, it takes a village, but it takes an influencer to bring the village together. And it's people might be thinking, oh, it's hard to be an influencer. I don't think it's hard to be an influencer when you believe so much in what you're doing and it serves the masses. It's not just about you. So back to that entrepreneurship as a service, influence as a service. That's what I'm hearing from you. Magnificent. Oh. Okay, we're getting really practical tips now on how to implement these ideas once you've got them. So that's really powerful. Sticking with the village theme, you and I met at a legal tech fund summit. So we were in a community of entrepreneurs when we met, and I was so lucky to find you there. I was going to ask you, and you kind of started on it, but let's go deeper. What is the role of community here for you? For example, I've got in mind, I might think to myself, that's nice, but I'm not a coder. I'm not very tech savvy. Yes, I might be the lawyer with the pain, but how am I going to actually solve it with tech? If I'm thinking that way, what's your advice to someone like me that doesn't really understand the ecosystem and what I need to do?
Yeah. The good news is the technology's advanced so much now that you don't need to know a single line of code, and people are building entire applications, right? So you can just do a quick search on ChatGPT or Perplexity for what is vibe coding. What are some vibe coding applications you can download? And you can actually, in natural language, just instruct it and say, I want you to build me a tool that does this and this. And it
Amazing.
can actually spit something out. That's like pretty cutting edge right
Wait,
now.
Kathy, so you're saying somebody heard my pain and created? vibe coding for me.
Exactly. There you
You
go, right?
see? There it is.
That's it. It's literally for all the non-technical people out there who want to build. I think that we're not super far from the future, and this sounds crazy, but it's not, where we can actually have massively successful businesses, maybe unicorn businesses, with a team of 10 people because they're able to just do so much with the technology at their disposal, and they can be non-technical people. It's just how good is the vision, how good is the execution and the idea. But even going back to when I first started in 2020, really with Streamline, it was a side project at the time. That vibe coding didn't exist. And I'm glad it didn't actually, because we did not use any shortcuts in our product whatsoever, and that served us very well. But I did learn how to use Figma. So there are design tools available now for non-technical people who, the blueprint, the entire first version of Streamline that we brought customers onto that I showed to my co-founder was designed by someone who has zero design experience, right? So I got a professional designer to give me some basic instructions, some basic wireframes, and I literally layered onto that and added, I need a button here and I need this drop down there. And I just slowly started to fill it out. And now, of course, it's, oh my gosh, light years better, but you have to start somewhere. The other thing is there are technical people out there. So the story of me joining forces with Julian is a very special one because one of the first conversations, by the way, Julian at the time was a product leader. He was working on Google Assistant, so he has this AI background. And he's also a former engineer by training. But one of the first things that he asked me when we met was, Kathy, what do lawyers even do all day? Like one of the worst parts of my job is dealing with my legal team. And I'm talk about pain. Like I could sniff this pain from a mile away. And this poor being was getting on a bus from Google's headquarters all the way to San Francisco every time he needed an approval from this one specific privacy lawyer. And his product launches were getting held up. Talk about bottlenecks, right? And this was for compliance because Google, as we all know, has like probably the most robust compliance protocol. So that got me thinking, wow, this person, if he's dealing with this much pain on the business side, this is something that both of us can solve together. And he was actually the one that said, I think we can build a real company around this. And he said, I think you should be the CEO, both of which I was like, what are you talking about? But if the pain, if the need is great enough, if other people are feeling the same need, you don't have to be the only one to do it all by yourself. That's the biggest innovation is you do not have to be the only one. And nothing about Streamline would actually exist today if I didn't have incredibly talented people in sales and customer success and design and engineering really getting this around me. But what you do need and what you cannot outsource is the vision. You need to have the vision for what this could be. And that will evolve and change over time. But that's how you get people excited. That's how when I was at DoorDash, I got the coach to come on board, the sales trainer, Brian Summers, to come on board. It was the vision that I was essentially selling. Yeah.
And then, like you said, back to the in-house situation, you were also able to have a compelling vision that influenced a specialist within the company to help, right? So you can get an army, a working group together to do something when the vision is compelling enough. And again, how is it going to be compelling? It doesn't just serve yourself, it serves others. And it's funny when you tell that story about Julie, I realize we can shrug and think about how we've got pains as compliance officers and lawyers, but you're right, we serve a whole client base who are suffering because we're suffering. So it's not just our peers that we're going to help. We're helping our actual clients and customers who have been putting up with our nonsense.
Oh my gosh, right?
Yeah, it's a good eye-opening and again, hopefully inspiring, right? So again, get out of your own head because it's not even about us anymore. Don't hide your talents because they're clearly needed. Your insights, your specific insights and experience of the pain is power. Back to what you said. No, I love that. Oh, so good. We need to bring you back for a weekly series.
If anyone needs a pep talk, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, pep talk, I'm going to be even more greedy now because the other part of community, the other aspect of community that I realize when you become an entrepreneur, it can be lonely, right? It can be lonely, but also you are learning all the time from others in the industry. Like you said, you've met lots of lawyers and in-house compliance professionals that have pain points. So you're probably seeing more beyond your own product. You're seeing what the next problem is you might want to solve. I'll ask you what you're going to do next later. But for now, I wanted to ask you, you imagine compliance 2030. What's the future that we should be thinking about right now? What are your best ideas for those of us that need a little nudge?
Yes. So, Hemma, going back to the summit where we did this really incredible future looking exercise, right? Where basically, like, with the developments that are happening in AI, how do we think that's going to come in and change? And we had some truly staggering outcomes where someone, I think, even said, we even still need these departments to do the work. How will the work even be in that future? I think it's always fascinating to think about these things, and there's many different, I think, possibilities. And we can't even grasp, honestly, at the rate at which things are developing. The worst AI model is the model we're using today because
Hope it will ever be. That's right.
exactly. But where I always like to go instead is let's look at where things are today. And we're talking to hundreds of legal departments. And I will say adoption is just so all over the map. And we have most legal departments that we're talking to that are still so reticent about even stepping a toe in the water, where they're still just seeing risks and what could go wrong and what about change management. And so to me, it's okay, let's not even worry about this crazy future because who knows what's going to happen. And instead, what is the next thing we can do today that can change and impact our lives now? And a lot of that actually isn't the crazy sexy thing. It's actually the very pragmatic, practical, probably pretty safe thing that you could be doing that can eliminate, again, like back to what we were talking about earlier, the stuff you shouldn't be doing so that you are free. Imagine if you could be free to do what it is that actually makes your heart sing.
No, that's true. And that resonates with me because one thing we don't afford ourselves enough time to do is think, right? To allow those ideas to come and those visions to form. And so I think you're right. If ever there was a reason to try to offload some of the business as usual work, the BAU, it was to give ourselves some time to think. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the exercise we did at TLTF, this Three Horizons framework, and happy to share some resources about that with the show notes. Because that's what I thought of when you said about having this vision. I was thinking of 2030, Horizon 3 in the model. And for the listeners, it's very basic. Horizon 1 is now, Horizon 3 is the far future, and Horizon 2 is what you do to bridge the gap. But I'm glad you mentioned that because actually what you're saying is you don't always have to think that far out for your big vision. It really is more time in the day, spend time on that other initiative that seems out of reach because you're too busy on the business as usual, unlocking the talents on your team because they did a great job building a workflow, but now they're stuck in charge of it for decades. That can't be right. We can't waste the talent on our team. And so I always say the new technology is just a way for us to unleash human potential. And this is what I mean. This is what you said is exactly what I mean, which is if we can just use the technology to do the things that we know how to do and don't need to learn anymore anything from, what could we do with that time? And so I see that as a very exciting thing. I don't want to stop this podcast. I've got so much I could ask you. But I wanted to close out by asking you, just sticking with the theme of entrepreneur in residence, what advice would you give to someone that's inspired by this conversation now and wants to start incrementally experimenting as an entrepreneur in residence?
So I think we've already talked a little bit about how we get started, which is there isn't a playbook you can really follow regarding that need because everybody's dealing with a different set of needs, right? It's unique to the challenges you're seeing and that you're facing. So I think now that you're excited and you're activated to do something about this, so look at what is a project that you want to take on this year, maybe. And write down a plan. This is actually what a lot of founders are encouraged to do is write down your initial business plan. So what is the pain? Who's all affected? And like we said, Hemma, it's so much better if it's not just about you, but if there's a bigger story that you could be telling, that's your vision. And what would happen if everything went right? What would be the downstream benefits? And if you can tie that to revenue, and if there's a bigger story around moving the business forward in some way. So I do think going back to what we're saying about elevating our departments in the eyes of the business, when we become too focused on what could go wrong, that's not ultimately what the CEO or the CFO is thinking about. We want to map ourselves to speaking in their language, thinking about what they think about, which is, hey, how can we actually grow and expand the business, right? How can we actually add to revenue? Ultimately, it's all about the revenue story. Maybe thinking through in your plan, what is the ultimate big payoff that can happen? And then who do you need to bring along your journey with you to make this successful? And then from there, it's like, what is the next conversation that you should be having? Who's the next person? I'm all about that. You'll see. It's all about the what is the next incremental step? Because if you want to think about all the way, how do I accomplish that final step to get to my destination? I'll tell you, I'm still figuring that out, right? I know where I want to go, but I don't know every single step. And I cannot predict all the people that will show up and all the resources that will show up along the way to help me. Just like I couldn't have predicted 4 years ago that I would be here today, right? With the 80 odd customers that we have and half of them in highly regulated industries. I was wildly wrong about that. I'm like, oh, this is great for tech companies, like the tech company I'm serving. No, a hospital is using Streamline now. We've got credit unions using Streamline. I'm like, wow. So it can get so much bigger than you ever dreamed that it could be, but you have to be focused very practically on what is that next incremental step that you take. And then also, if you want some inspiration, I have some podcasts that I would recommend that folks listen to. One is How I Built This by Guy Raz. I love that because Guy interviews some of the most successful founders, but you will listen to how much they struggled in the early days. It wasn't like success fell down from the sky and dropped into their laps, right? It is like a difficult journey for almost everybody, especially in the early days. And then the other podcast is by Lenny. I forget Lenny's last name, but if you Google it, you'll find it. And he's amazing at bringing on leaders, product leaders especially, but all sorts of other leaders that come in to talk about their own disciplines and how to make a business really successful. And as lawyers, I think so often we are in that mode, like you said, Hemma, being the service provider, being the counselor. We need to also understand what the world looks like from the eyes of a product leader, from the eyes of somebody in revenue operations, in sales. Because if we don't understand what they care about, how do we really bridge the gap and counsel them in a way that they're going to understand and listen to? So
I love that. Look, and when I say unleash human potential, the time for us to do more important things, that's what I'm thinking about too, right? Like we can get to go and meet those people and really understand what they need, as opposed to sitting in our offices with the workflows. So I love that. Okay, one last question, if I may. And I want to we talked about entrepreneurship as a service a lot. So I want to go back now to you, Kathy, the individual, Kathy, the woman. What has this done for you? Get on this journey, leaning in the way you do. How has it changed life for the better for you personally?
oh my gosh, that's such a big question, and I'm hope I don't get teary-eyed. It's changed my life, and it's really changed the way that I see myself. So I think so often we put ourselves in these boxes, right? And the earliest boxes that I put myself in is I'm a woman. I'm also an immigrant. My family started from nothing. We didn't come to this country with all the resources and networks, and I was figuring out the college system when I first moved at the age of 15. So I immediately felt behind. What is a PSAT? What is an SAT? Like a jumble of letters. So these boxes end up confining us and confining the ways in which we see possibility. You see these things. I, of course, hear about these amazing entrepreneurs and CEOs. The first thing that comes to mind is that's somebody else and that's not me and it cannot be me. And we don't even realize that we have all these hidden narratives going on 24/7 all the time, right? In our minds. And what I've realized that's probably the biggest realization of being on this journey is I cannot be put in a box. And that it sounds corny, but you really discover your own future and that sky is the limit as long as you're willing and open to putting yourself out there and you're comfortable with the possibility that things may not go the way you planned. It may go even better. I've had to honestly stretch in so many ways I never imagined would be possible, but it's led me to probably the deepest level of fulfillment and joy. And I wake up and I think, wow, I am so grateful that I have the opportunity to wake up and do this. So that's possible for every single person. It's not just for me.
So beautiful. I am moved. That it's just so beautifully articulated. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your talents with the world. We need you. And thank you for inspiring me personally and others, I'm sure, that are listening to find their own purpose and potential and true happiness. I always quote David Meltzer. He says, happiness is the consistent, persistent, without quit pursuit of your potential. And that's the definition of you, Kathy. I hope you feel very happy because you make me happy and you've done amazing things. So thank you for joining me today. We'll definitely have to have you back. And I will definitely share, if I may, details of how to contact you, learn more about Streamline AI, the podcast that you mentioned, and any other resources so that my listeners can get more of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hemma. This has been absolutely delightful. And you just have such a unique way of making these conversations just feel so intimate and, yeah, and comfortable. So thank you so much for having me. And it's been delightful.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Kathy.